Hi class, welcome to your weekly YouTube video. If you're watching this on Friday, don't forget by 11:59 tonight, your informative speech is due, and that is composed of two components. One, your actual video presentation of your speech, which should be uploaded to your YouTube account, your channel, with the link then included in your second component, which is your presentation outline. And the outline needs to be exactly as we have discussed it in previous classes. You can look in last week's information in the video, but also in the example link that's in last week's section of our Moodle page. Your YouTube link needs to be in that outline as well, and that needs to be uploaded to its own link on the Moodle page by 11:59 tonight. I am really looking forward to seeing your videos. I know they're going to be great. I know everyone will do a fantastic job with their speeches. Can't wait to grade them. If you're watching this video though on Saturday or Sunday, I have faith I'm going to be watching your video this weekend. We'll be watching them on class on Tuesday, so get ready for that. But don't forget, you also have two remote assignments that are going to be due Sunday night at 11:59. So got the speech due Friday, the two remote assignments due Sunday night, a lot to do this weekend. Next weekend, we have a test that you'll take anytime from Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I'm not sure we'll also have a YouTube video that weekend as well. Be sure to come to class on Tuesday and I'll give you the final verdict. All right. We started last week, Tuesday, I guess this week is last week, talking about our special occasion speeches, as well as our persuasive speeches. And so we need to talk a little bit about persuasion. How does persuasion work and how we can use it? And that's going to be our focus today in this video. So let me share my screen. I'm going to scratch my nose real quick. And let's set up. I don't know why it's doing this, but there you go. All right. So when we want to persuade somebody or a group, the first thing we have to think about is how we build our credibility. Credibility is basically our trustworthiness. Why should someone listen to you and believe what you're saying? So when we talk about credibility, there are really two components. One is competence, which relates to a speaker's intelligence, their expertise about something, how much knowledge they have about it, but it also pertains to their character, their sincerity, their honesty, basically, how trustworthy they appear, and whether or not they seem to be demonstrating goodwill with the audience. There are three types of credibility that someone might display while they're speaking, where they're having kind of any kind of communication where they're trying to persuade somebody or some group to do something. And the three types are initial credibility, derived credibility, and terminal credibility. And pretty much they are as they say on the box. Initial credibility is the credibility a speaker has before they even start talking. If someone has a position, a job that gives them, you would assume they have the information that pertains to whatever they're talking about, and they should have a lot of expertise about it. You go into that communication situation, if you're the audience, thinking that they should have a good amount of credibility already. If I'm a doctor, for example, and I want to persuade people to get certain health check screenings because I'm a doctor and I have a background in healthcare, I see a lot of patients, I know a lot about medical things, I know about healthcare, I know about screenings. Even before I start talking, because you know I'm a doctor and we're talking about healthcare, you might think, oh, I think I should listen to this person because they already seem credible. Derived credibility then is credibility that's earned while the communication is underway, while you're speaking. So as you speak, you need to be giving information, but also demonstrating your expertise, your goodwill, your trustworthiness, so that people, while they're listening to you, start picking it up. Oh, what they're saying really makes sense to me. I believe this, and if I believe that, then I'm likely to believe what's coming up next. You know, so as you go through the communication, you become more and more credible to the audience. And then finally, terminal credibility is the credibility that a speaker has right at the end or after their speech. Hopefully, terminal credibility is Excellent. You've done the job of creating and crafting your argument so well that at the end of the communication, people are just ready to do whatever you have persuaded them to do. So initial, beginning, derived, obtained during, and terminal at the end. Another part of persuading people is using evidence. Basically, we need to get data, information, facts, statistics that prove your points and back up your assertions. You know, someone could give a lot of main points as to why they think you should do something or think something, but unless you're really giving them the backup information, the reasons why you should believe it or do it, it's just a lot of statements. You have to explain why those statements are valid. So when we're using evidence, one, you need to be specific. You can't just throw out a lot of generalities and expect people to go along with it. You also need to use the most new information. You can't pull out information that's 50 years old and hope that people will just be like, oh, well, that makes sense to me. Pretty much everything that happened 50 years ago has been updated in some way. So be sure to try to use the most current reasoning and statistics and information you can find. Make sure you use your information also from credible sources. Don't just use any old source that you happen to find on the internet. Make sure that your information, your statistics come from very credible themselves, groups, individuals, governmental bodies, that sort of thing. And then you have to make sure that not only are you presenting this evidence, these statistics, these facts, but you have to explain how then they work within your persuasion. It's another thing. You can't just throw out, you know, your main points and be like, bang, here you go, believe it. So when I even throw out statistics, I have to explain what those statistics mean in the whole realm of what I'm trying to persuade people to do. You know, numbers a lot of times sound good, but unless you explain why those numbers are important to explain why you should think something or should do something, it's still a bunch of hot air. You have to be very specific when you're using evidence. So continuing to talk about credibility, there are a lot of ways you can enhance the credibility that you start with so that your derived and your terminal credibility are as good as they can be. Firstly, you should explain your competence or your knowledge, your experiences. Even if you are a doctor, you have pretty good initial credibility. During the beginning of your speech, you probably want to say, hi, I'm Dr. such and such, and here is why I think you should listen to me today. I'm a general practitioner. I've been practicing medicine for individuals and families for 20 years. And the information I am relating to you not only comes from statistics and facts that I know, but also from my own experiences. So you need to explain why people should listen to you, in addition to showing that you have common ground with your audience. A lot of times that can really go a long way. If you have common experiences with the audience, they feel that goodwill, they feel that kinship with you. And if you believe something, a lot of times that can go a long way into explaining why they should also believe something or experience or do something. You also want to use good delivery and present your speech with conviction. You don't want to sound namby-pamby and monotone and whiny. You know, if I'm like, you know, I'm Dr. Penny and I'm here today to talk about why you should get health screenings. You know, health screenings can do a big job in preventing big health problems down the line. You know, if I'm talking like that, it really doesn't sound like I'm taking it seriously. I'm not conveying how important this idea is. So you need to have the courage of your convictions, not necessarily be aggressive, but you do want to have impact to what you want to say. We also need to talk about reasoning. You want to give a logical argument when you're trying to persuade people or a group or a person. If something doesn't make sense to whoever you're trying to communicate with, then you've lost them already and there's no point in even going on. What you say has to make sense, has to be logical to your audience. So you need to be able to have them draw conclusions based on the evidence that you've presented, and those conclusions must be logical. There's a lot of ways to do this. You can reason from specific instances, which basically is a fancy way of saying you can use examples. If people can identify with the example you present and think, I've experienced something like you've stated in that example. That makes sense to me. That's a logical thing I can infer from that example. That can help. You can also reason from principles, which basically means stating beliefs that you have about something and then getting people to understand that they also hold those same beliefs. If we're saying, we all as Americans hold these certain beliefs, and if you're like me and you hold these beliefs as an American person, then you should also go with my persuasion here. And honestly, that works quite well. We also have causal reasoning, which means you're explaining that relationship between a cause and an effect. You can start with, if A causes B and B causes C, then we can logically say that A can also cause C. If people can follow that kind of logic and be like, okay, A, B, B, C, A, absolutely. It really is, that's honestly one of the most logical kinds of persuasion you can do. And then we have analogical reasoning, which means you're comparing two things and then making an inference about them. If people understand the first thing and then they understand the second thing, and you're explaining the relationship that they have, and they see that happens logically, as long as those two things then refer to whatever you're trying to have the persuasion about, you can then infer that the persuasion is valid. Whenever we talk about persuasion, we need to also talk about faulty reasoning or fallacies. There are quite a lot of things that people do and say when they're trying to persuade people that sound like they should be logical or make sense, but really they are fallacies. They are not true. And I think this is a really important part even of our whole class, because even if okay, I will not do these things in my own speeches, you experience these things every day from people who are trying to persuade you. And if you can identify these, you can think, aha, they think they're being logical, but I know what this is. This is a fallacy. And that will help you determine if someone is or isn't credible in your own life, in your job as an audience member. So let's talk about some of these fallacies. Firstly, we have a hasty generalization. This happens when people jump to a conclusion based on a small sample. For example, if I say, because all of the people in McDonough are pro ballot A measure, then I think everybody in the whole Atlanta region should be pro ballot A measure, because I've taken this small suburb of the metro area and polled them, and they all appear to be pro ballot A. I say, okay, most of Atlanta, I think, will be pro A because McDonough is a small subset of Atlanta. Well, yeah, but we're not homogeneous. You can't use this really small sample size and then extrapolate to everybody. Now, if you took a random sample of people throughout the metro area, you might be able to generalize from that. But just saying that because of these people in this one area who aren't really homogeneous in the first place, just because they seem to poll one way doesn't mean you can expand it to the much larger group. A false cause fallacy says that just because one thing happened after another, it doesn't mean that the first thing caused the other thing. For example, if I say, every time I wash my car, it rains. Every single time. Why do I even wash my car? Because it's just going to rain afterwards. I think the fact that I wash my car causes the rain. That's not even true. But you hear people talk like this all the time. So a lot of times you'll hear people explaining, well, this happened and then this happened, so this thing must have caused that. you can't always logically follow from that. You have to look at both of those instances and really be able to make the connection. And a lot of times it's a false connection. An invalid analogy occurs when you compare two things, but they're really not alike. And I'm trying to think of an example right now, but I'm just not coming up with one. This is a weird video. I apologize. I'll have to look up an example and talk to you on Tuesday about it, because I usually on these fallacies I do pretty well, but for some reason that one is just not popping up into my head. Nonetheless, you know, sometimes people will compare one thing to another thing and be like, oh, they're practically the same thing. And you're like, no, they're not. They're really not at all. So watch for that. I promise I will come up with a good example of that on Tuesday. More fallacies. So bandwagon, honestly, I learned about this when I was in high school, and it just, honestly, it's one of my favorite fallacies. It's thinking that because everyone's doing it, that it's the right thing to do. Just because the majority thinks a certain way or does a certain thing, that it must be a good thing to do. This comes from a historic thing where, gosh, back from like 1900 to about 1930, probably about 1940, if you lived in a small town and you were running for office, one of the things you would do is you would get up on a big wagon and either a horse would pull you all around town, or if you had like an old vehicle back then, sometimes that would do it. But you would stand on this bandwagon and people would be like, vote for such and such, vote for such and such. And you would wave and you'd be on a bandwagon, like your own little one vehicle parade. And if you agreed with them, you could jump up on the bandwagon. And if people saw like a whole bunch of people up on the bandwagon, you'd think, wow, that a lot of people are really going for that candidate. They must know what they're talking about. So if you talk about people jumping on the bandwagon, that's kind of where that comes from. It means you have a whole lot of people who appear to be pro one thing or anti another thing. And you think, wow, because there's a whole bunch of people who are pro this or against that, I bet because they all seem to be that way, I bet that's the right way to be. And honestly, just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing. We have a lot of examples through history of that happening. Next up, red herrings. Red herrings are basically irrelevant issues that are used to distract your audience when you're trying to help get them not to listen to your argument per se, or you're trying, maybe they throw something out and you're like, I should answer that, but instead I'm going to distract you with this completely different issue. For example, your kid wants to borrow the car and you're like, they're giving you all sorts of good reasons why they should, and you're trying to persuade them not, and you throw out, and honestly, I was thinking that you and I should both go out, maybe, and we get some coffee tonight, have a together night, you know, and you start talking about things you can do together, and before they know it, you're not talking about them borrowing the car anymore. You've distracted them enough and they go, hey, later on, I was going to borrow the car, you know. So you do this a lot. I know I do this a lot. Sometimes you just don't want to agree with somebody, or you don't want to go along with what they're saying, so you try to change the subject. And that's basically what having a red herring is. It's a fake issue that you bring up, or a topic you bring up to kind of distract people from what they really want to talk about. An ad hominem fallacy or attack is basically when you attack the person rather than attacking the issue at hand. So, for example, and this is another one I'm having trouble thinking of one right off the top of my head. Oh, let's say you go in and your doctor is trying to tell you ways that you need to be treating your son. They say your son needs a whole battery of medical tests because they see some symptoms that are alarming to them. And let's say you're the mom and your kid seems perfectly fine to you. They might be doing some things that are peculiar, but you know, kids do peculiar things. And so you might throw out, well, what do you know? Yeah, you're a doctor, fine, but you've never been a mother, and a mother knows these things. Well, that doctor may have never been a mother, but they're a doctor still. And you're not necessarily attacking what they're saying. You're attacking them because you're getting personal about it. You've never been a mother. How do you know? instead of saying, well, here's how I know my kid doesn't need all these screenings you want to do. So happens a lot too, especially in politics, where people attack each other and not necessarily focus on the issues at hand. Even more fallacies, they come out of everywhere. So either or fallacies makes people choose between two options, and they're usually all or nothing kind of things. They're complete opposites, and they're basically making it seem like those are the only two options you have. It's either this or that. There's nothing else. So for example, let's say a politician comes out and says, well, either people can have all the guns they want, or people can have none of the guns at all. There are no two choices about it. Which do you choose? Well, the answer is, there's a lot of other things that we could do. Maybe we have certain kinds of guns. Maybe we have a limit on how many. Maybe certain people can have guns, but not other people. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things that you could do. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing. A slippery slope fallacy basically occurs when someone says, you know what, we're going to start with these initial steps. And once you allow that to happen, it's just going to snowball. It's going to start sliding like a snowball down a slippery slope, and it'll just get bigger and bigger until you can't control it anymore. Later on, it's going to lead to a big problem. So, even by allowing something small to happen, you're opening the door for bigger problems to come later, but you've opened the door with those little things. And just because some small things are allowed doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to have big consequences. Sometimes they do, not always, and that's why it's a fallacy. An appeal tradition, boy, I'm getting tongue-tied. An appeal to tradition occurs when people praise things that we've always done because they're old. We've always done them that way. So they're better than new ways because they're tried and true. A converse of that is the appeal to novelty, where people are like, this is new, so it's better than things we've had before because it's new. Things that happen new are updated. They're naturally better. Neither one of these things are completely true. Some old things definitely are worthy of our interest and they have good outcomes still. And then we do have new things that are also worthy of our interest, and they have updated things, but not everything. So just because someone comes up and goes, you know what, this is tried and true, it was good for my grandfather, it was good for my father, and it's good for us too. Just because they say that doesn't mean it's necessarily so. Just the same, someone comes up and goes, those were the olden days. These are the now times, and we have to go with now information. And this now information we're going with is better because it is new, because it's on the cusp. This item is better because it is new, it's updated. That's not necessarily true either, basically. So you have to listen to what the real message is behind what they're saying. You also need to kind of get to know the topic or the product or the issue at hand, so you can make your own decision, your own judgment about it. Whew. So anytime we're persuading, we also want to appeal to our listeners, to our audience's emotions. There's a lot of ways we can do that. And watch television, go on the interwebs, listen to people give all sorts of speeches where they're trying to persuade you. And no doubt, one of these emotions they will try to be stirring up in you. It could be fear. Politicians do this. You should be afraid if the other candidate wins. This scary thing can happen to you. Compassion. We want you to help us out. We want you to have compassion for these people or this group or this part of our world that we live in. We want you to give. A lot of times that comes with giving things. Pride. You know what? We all stand together as a group and we take pride in that. We want you to believe what we believe. We want you to do what we do because we're a proud people. Anger. This is happening in our community and it's a disgrace. It's terrible. We want you to get riled up because when you're riled up, that forces you to take action. Guilt. You know what? We should have done this all along. We are way down the road on this. Mea culpa. It's not too late though. So if you feel guilty about letting this opportunity almost slip by, it's not too late. Here's what you should be doing or thinking. And then we have reverence. This is something we should all be in awe of. We should all be respectful of. We should all come together and feel just this awesome power from whatever you're talking about. And because we all share that emotion, I share it. I want you to do what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling because we are all sharing this reverential moment. There are lots of ways we can appeal to emotions. One is by using emotional language, using specific verbs and adjectives that really paint pictures and get our imaginations working so that whatever they're saying emotionally, we start feeling emotionally because all the visions and things that we're seeing in our mind's eye. We want to develop vivid examples that are easy to visualize, which I just mentioned. And then remember when we talked about doing delivery and speaking with sincerity and that conviction again. If you're namby-pamby again, if you're not motivated or don't sound like you're motivated, if you sound like it's not super important to you, you know, you're just not going to stir up those emotions and get people feeling the way you want them to feel. So once again, we need to speak confidently. We need to speak clearly and with conviction and make sure that people understand this is an emotion I want to be sharing with you. I feel this way. I want you to feel that way too. And then I want you to do what I need you to do or want you to do, or I want you to think the way I would like you to think. Whew. That's a lot of persuasion stuff. And I'm sorry I was so fumbly over it. I burnt my tongue earlier in the day. Don't you hate when that happens? Because then you bleh the whole time. Honestly, that was a diversion. So I'm going to shrink myself up a little bit so we can take a look at the information on our 2 remote exercises. I mentioned these in our class on Tuesday, but if you need a reminder, the first one is visual aid examples from real speeches. For your first remote exercise this weekend, due Sunday night by 11:59, I want you to find 2 speeches online, just troll YouTube, where the speaker uses a visual aid. Each speech needs to use, though, a different kind of visual aid. Remember, we talked about visual aids and all the different kinds on Tuesday's class. And for example, if one of the speeches that you want to share has the guy using, for example, an item, where they're demonstrating something with an item, your next link to a speech, they can't be using an item. They could be using a chart or a graph or a photo, you know, any of the other types, even themselves. Remember, you and yourself, your body can be a visual aid. So it needs to be 2 different kinds of visual aids for this assignment. And in a Word document, don't forget your name, class, the date. And for each of the speeches, I want you to list the name of that video, the file, the speech, and put the web address in it so I can look at it. And then 3 things. 1, what was the type of visual aid used? Is it an object or an item? Is it a chart? Is it a graph? Is it a photo? Is it a video? Is it themselves? Is it, you know, any of the many things that could be a visual aid? Then why do you think that speaker chose that particular visual aid? And it can't just be because it was effective. I want you to really explain why they probably picked that visual aid. Then thirdly, was it effective? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. So I want you to say yes or no, and then explain why. Not everybody uses visual aids well. And sometimes people use visual aids that are distracting. You see a lot of people when they make these videos where they start explaining things, and then they throw up little clips of video, for example, of funny bits here and there that they think keep attention. And they might keep attention, but they distract you from what they're talking about sometimes too. So maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it depends on the particular instance. So I want you to explain whatever the visual aid is, whether or not it was effective to you or not. And it can't just be because I believed it. I want you to really explain it. See, you can tell I've heard every answer before. In your second remote exercise this week, it is also due Sunday night by 11:59. In a Word document, I want you to let me know what your special occasion speech topic is going to be. You just got done, or you're getting done, if you're watching this on Friday. Hopefully you're done with your informative speech by the time you watch this video. You just got done with one speech. We're plunging headlong into your second speech, your special occasion speech, and it needs to be pertaining to one of these two things. You need to either be commemorating a person or you'll be commemorating a group. It needs to be someone you admire or respect, or a group that you admire or respect. And I want you to state then in your Word document that's also formatted, like we do all of them, have your name, the class, whatever, blah, 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 blah. We need you to say what your specific purpose is going to be. So if it's a person, remember your specific purpose always starts with to commemorate. And the person needs to be what their name is, to commemorate. For example, if it's my mother, to commemorate my mother, Garlinda Walls, that's her name. Who, and then, why you want to commemorate them. If it's a group, let's say I want to commemorate my church, it would be to commemorate my church, St. Mark United Methodist Church of Midtown Atlanta, because, and then the reasons why you would want to commemorate them. It needs to be either 2 or 3 things. That would be your main points. And then I also want you to put, in addition to your special, I'm having the worst time today, can you tell? In addition to your specific purpose statement, I want you to include your central idea and your main points. So if your specific purpose was, in my case, for example, to commemorate Garlinda Walls, my mother, for doing this one thing and doing this other thing, then my central idea would probably be, my mother, Garlinda Walls, deserves respect and honor today because she did this one thing and then she did this second thing. And then the main points of my speech would be, my mom did the first thing, and then second, my mom, Garlinda Walls, did the second thing. Boy, I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, send me a text, send me an email, and call me, you've got my number, and we'll work it out. But if you're at class Tuesday and you've been watching this video, hopefully that all did make sense to you. So in the document, you need to have the specific purpose statement, you need to have the central idea, and then your main points, whether or not they are 2 or 3. Remember, the main points are always sentences, not just phrases. I should have started this video over again and done it from scratch, but I didn't. I just wanted to get it done. My tongue is still burnt. It's so lame. So please forgive me. Do not rate my class badly because, oh, she makes terrible videos. Hopefully you don't think that. Don't forget, you can contact me. You can call me, you can text me, you can email me if you have any questions about the things we're talking about. If you're having difficulty doing your outline or doing your presentation of your speech, if you're practicing and having trouble, or like I said, if you have questions about those remote exercises, don't forget, you can always contact me. I'm going to say it again. You can always contact me. I might not get back to you that second, but I will get back to you. So have a good rest of your weekend. Have a breath. For having just finished one assignment, we're leaping right on into our test and our second speech. So let's keep the momentum going, and thumbs up. I know we're doing great. Hopefully you feel great too. I'll see you on Tuesday.